Flashes of distant explosions painted the distant sky of Kalos 7, a planet far from the core systems, where the largest human fleet clashed against the coalition of alien forces. From the surface, it looked like stars being born and dying in rapid succession, their light distorted by the atmosphere. The battle was too far to see in detail, but the ripples of energy weapons and detonations cast faint, haunting shadows across the starscape. A coalition once fractured by rivalry now fought side by side, driven by fear. Humanity's advance had left no room for diplomacy. The war had stretched for years, and despite humanity's smaller numbers, they fought with relentless adaptability, leveraging every weakness until even the largest enemy fleets crumbled under coordinated strikes. Kalos 7 was another node in that long, grinding conflict. It wasn't the first, and it wouldn't be the last. Aboard the UES Ironclad, stationed at a remote orbital colony far from the engagement zone, Captain James Vance watched the distant spectacle through live transmissions flickering across the bridge's main screen. Tactical overlays painted the battlefield with tags and designations. Human ships, locking horns with angular alien warships that maneuvered with serpentine precision. From his vantage point, the battle seemed to sway in humanity's favor. But Vance knew better than to trust appearances. Behind him, the hum of the bridge mixed with low chatter. Officers worked diligently, but there was no urgency in their movements. The Ironclad wasn't part of that fight. She was too far away, assigned to colonial defense rather than the front lines. Vance's crew monitored the engagement like distant spectators, far from the adrenaline of real combat. Lieutenant Idris shifted in his seat at the comm station. His headset crackled faintly before he spoke. Fleet Command reports that Kalos 7 remains under control. Enemy forces are holding formation, but no breakthroughs yet. Vance nodded slightly, still watching the streams of light in the sky. And our orders remain the same? Idris glanced back. Affirmative. We stay put. Command wants all secondary colonies under full guard. Vance allowed himself a faint sigh, folding his arms as he stepped away from the viewport. The worst thing we can do is sit back and wait, while the main fleet fights for the sector. Fleet Command disagrees, sir, Idris replied dryly. They want stability on the fringes. Vance said nothing. He understood the logic, even if he didn't like it. The Ironclad's role wasn't to win battles, but to hold the line in places that most people didn't think twice about. Places like this outpost. Sir. Ensign Grady from Tactical cut in, drawing Vance's attention. Station 12's reporting interference along their perimeter. Could be sensor drift, but they've flagged it for follow-up. Vance frowned. Details? Grady scanned the incoming data. Minimal. Might be debris or gravitational anomalies. They're running diagnostics. Keep an eye on it. Flag any changes. Aye, sir. For a while, the bridge returned to quiet observation. Vance moved along the command deck, listening to the rhythmic updates from his officers. Routine held firm, but there was an undercurrent of tension that no one voiced aloud. The battle at Kalos 7 dominated their thoughts, even if it felt like someone else's war. Idris's voice broke the stillness. Sir, additional reports are coming in from scattered outposts further along the sector. Minor raids, nothing substantial, but it's adding up. Vance's brow furrowed. How many? 4 so far. Different locations, light attacks. Command isn't escalating response yet. He crossed the deck, resting his hand on the back of Idris's chair. The screen flickered with dots marking the raid locations, small pinpricks on the edge of humanity's reach. Notify me the moment one of those raids escalates, Vance said quietly. Yes, sir. Vance returned to the viewport, gaze lingering on the distant flashes of the Kalos 7 engagement. For now, his crew was safe. Below them, the colony's surface shimmered faintly under the artificial lights of the orbital station. From this height, it looked peaceful, clusters of domed settlements barely visible against the dark terrain. But Vance knew better. The thin line separating calm from chaos was often invisible until it was too late. The flickering lights of the Kalos 7 battle faded into the distance as the UES Ironclad drifted silently along the orbital perimeter of the colony. Captain Vance lingered by the viewport, eyes locked on the distant flashes until they became nothing more than faint glimmers. The hum of the bridge was steady, routine. That illusion wouldn't last much longer. "Captain," Lieutenant Idris called from the comms station, pulling off his headset. "We've been reassigned. Orders just came through from Fleet Command." Vance turned, brow raising slightly. "Reassigned? I didn't expect that to happen while the main fleet is still engaged." "Neither did I," Idris admitted, tapping the console to transfer the briefing to Vance's display. "There's trouble at Colonia Theta 9. Sporadic attacks on the orbital station. Command wants the Ironclad and 2 escort frigates to reinforce them." Vance exhaled through his nose. Theta 9 wasn't far, but it wasn't critical either. At least not by strategic standards. Still, attacks this close to the colonies couldn't be ignored. "Grady," Vance called, turning to tactical. "What's our current readiness?" Grady checked his station. "Patrol squadrons are docked, and weapon systems are fully operational. We can depart within 10 minutes. "Good. Send word to the frigates. I want them ready to launch alongside us." "Yes, sir." Idris leaned slightly toward Vance, lowering his voice. "Theta 9 isn't exactly a priority target. Feels like a waste of resources. Why hit Theta 9 when Kalos 7's the real prize?" Vance's jaw tensed, but he shook his head. "No such thing as random anymore. Not in this war." The Ironclad slipped free from the station's orbital dock, accompanied by the UNS Vanguard and UNS Harbinger, 2 light escort frigates painted in muted steel tones that blended with the cold darkness of space. The formation accelerated as they crossed the planetary shadow, angling toward Theta 9. The bridge was quiet, the crew accustomed to the steady rhythm of departure. Idris monitored comm channels, patching through reports from outposts along their route. Most were routine updates, but fragments of intercepted chatter trickled in, painting an incomplete picture of the Theta 9 situation. "Captain," Idris spoke, one hand pressed to his headset. "Fleet Command just issued a sector-wide update. Main engagement at Kalos 7 is progressing. Early reports suggest heavy damage to enemy formations." Vance folded his arms. "And casualties on our end?" Idris hesitated, then shook his head. "Nothing confirmed. But the battle's far from over." The crew's mood lightened slightly. Positive updates were rare, and even the slightest advantage felt like relief. Grady smirked. "Maybe by the time we're back, the war will be one fight closer to ending." Vance didn't respond, his gaze fixed on the approaching colony. Confidence wasn't something he indulged in often. Theta 9 appeared on the outer edge of their visual range, a small station hugging the curve of a barren moon. The station's exterior lights shimmered faintly, but as the Ironclad closed the distance, the scars of recent battle became evident. Scorched plating marred the station's hull, and debris drifted in loose formation along the outer docking arms. "Theta 9, this is UES Ironclad approaching from Sector Corridor 7. Request status on ongoing engagement," Vance said into the comms. Static hummed before a response crackled through. "Ironclad, this is Theta 9 control. We're holding position but still under sporadic fire. Enemy skirmishers remain at the perimeter." "Copy that. We're en route. Hang tight." As Vance severed the line, Grady spoke up. "Sir, we've got movement at the colony edge. Looks like alien signatures, light craft. At least 3 wings." Idris nodded. Theta 9 wasn't exaggerating. They're still under attack. Vance stepped to the center of the bridge. "Bring us into formation. Vanguard and Harbinger will cover the flanks. Arm all forward batteries. We engage the moment we're in range." The Ironclad pressed forward, its escort frigates spreading out on either side like blades drawn for battle. Within moments, the first enemy signatures lit up the tactical map. The initial barrage was scattered and disorganized. Plasma bolts fizzled harmlessly against the Ironclad's forward shields, and return fire from the frigates sliced through the enemy formations with precision. 2 enemy craft exploded in the distance, their burning wreckage drifting slowly toward the barren moon. For a moment, the battlefield felt manageable, like a skirmish they had the upper hand in. Vance narrowed his eyes, keeping his focus sharp. That was when the second wave emerged. Larger vessels, moving with cold coordination. The enemy had only been probing their defenses. Now the real attack began. "Flank maneuver," Vance ordered. "Push them back." The ironclad veered starboard, unleashing a salvo that ruptured an enemy corvette. Grady called out from tactical, "Enemy reinforcements inbound. Bigger ships, frigate class." Before Vance could respond, the ironclad lurched violently, the deck trembling beneath their feet. A low, metallic groan reverberated through the hull, followed by the sharp hiss of atmosphere venting from somewhere deep in the aft section. Warning lights flared across the bridge. Grady cursed under his breath, gripping the console as another explosion rocked the lower decks. Hull integrity dropped visibly on the monitors. They weren't just under fire, sections of the ship were beginning to buckle. "Hull breach on deck 12, Idris shouted over the alarms. "Sealing bulkheads, but stabilizers are offline." "We're bleeding out here," Grady growled, his voice tight. "If they hit us again..." "Focus fire on their lead ship," Vance cut in, his tone sharp. "We're not done yet." "Direct hit," Idris confirmed, his hands tightening on the console. "Aft stabilizers are down. Communications are fluctuating. Sir, we've lost thrust control on the port side. One more hit and we're finished." Vance's knuckles whitened against the railing. "Reroute auxiliary power. Keep firing." The battle had just begun. Smoke hung low in the corridors of the ironclad, swirling lazily around flickering emergency lights. Captain Vance wiped the sweat from his brow, his eyes narrowing at the cracked display screen flashing damage reports faster than his mind could process. The ship groaned beneath him, her frame buckling with each glancing blow from the alien corvettes, circling like vultures. "Captain, forward batteries are offline," Idris called from the console, voice strained but steady. "Auxiliary power is failing. Shields are down to 8%. Vance didn't respond immediately. His gaze lingered on the tactical display. Their flanking maneuver had worked briefly, but now the enemy had regrouped. The Harbinger and Vanguard were gone, their hulls nothing but scattered debris glinting against Theta 9's pale atmosphere. There was no backup coming. The ironclad wasn't going to last. "Grady," Vance said, his voice lower than usual. "Can we ram her?" Grady turned sharply from his station. "Sir?" "That alien frigate leading the assault," Vance clarified, nodding toward the main viewport where the distinct silhouette of the enemy ship loomed. "If we can close the distance, hit them directly, we might be able to breach their hull." Grady hesitated, then gave a short nod. "It could work, but we'd have to strip every non-essential system and redirect everything to thrusters." "And the ironclad won't survive it," Idris added quietly. Vance met his eyes. "She's not surviving this anyway." The silence that followed spoke louder than words. Every member of the bridge crew knew the reality they faced. Vance exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of command settle across his shoulders. "Do it," he ordered. "Redirect power to the engines. Set a collision course." Idris didn't hesitate. "Yes, sir." The ironclad trembled as her remaining engines roared to life, pushing the battered warship forward. The alien frigate noticed too late. Plasma bolts streaked through space, but the ironclad pressed on, cutting through the firestorm with unwavering resolve. "Impact in 40 seconds, Grady called. Vance activated the comms, his voice carrying across the ship. "All hands, brace for collision. Prepare boarding teams. This fight isn't over yet." He cut the channel and met Idris's gaze once more. "Get your team ready. We're taking that ship." Idris nodded, already moving toward the exit. "I'll meet you in the docking bay. Rourke, you and Grady stay with the second team. If this thing tears open, I need you covering our exit," Vance said, locking eyes with both men. Grady grunted in acknowledgement, double-checking the charge on his rifle. "Won't let them flank us, sir." Rourke gave a brief nod, gripping the strap of his med kit. "We'll hold the line." The ironclad groaned, locked against the alien frigate like a rusted nail driven into bone. Boarding clamps engaged, and the bulkheads creaked as the teams forced their way inside. Vance led the boarding party through the ruptured corridors, each step heavier than the last. His muscles burned, but he couldn't afford to slow down, not when every second mattered. The faces around him mirrored his exhaustion, but no one dared voice it. "Move fast," Vance ordered, gesturing for Idris to lead his unit down the adjacent corridor. "We don't have time for clean sweeps. Priority is the bridge." Idris gave a sharp nod. "Understood." He signaled his squad forward, weapons raised as they slipped into the shadows ahead. The enemy wasn't going to roll over easily. Suddenly, alien soldiers emerged from the haze, tall, sinewy figures clad in segmented armor that seemed to ripple as they moved. Their skin, where visible beneath helmets and plating, glistened like polished stone, reflecting the flicker of emergency lights in unnatural hues of blue and green. Their eyes, large and lidless, glowed faintly, tracking movements with predatory precision. Their weapons pulsed with an organic hum, as if the firearms were more alive than mechanical. When the first alien dropped under suppressive fire, the body twisted unnaturally, limbs folding in ways that defied human anatomy before collapsing into stillness. Every corner turned revealed new resistance. Alien soldiers fought with an almost feral desperation, their weapons crackling against the bulkheads. The air reeked of scorched metal and blood, and with every fallen enemy the humans pressed further, their boots slick with the aftermath of the engagement. Idris ducked behind a support beam, motioning for 2 Marines to flank the next hallway. "Captain, we're approaching the central lift. Main access to their command deck is ahead." Vance pressed his back against the cold steel wall beside Idris. "Blow it open. We can't afford delays." Sergeant Ocampo knelt, locking a shimmering breaching charge onto the lift door. The device pulsed with faint blue light, tendrils of energy slithering across the metal surface like electric veins. With a sharp hiss, the charge detonated, silent for half a second, before collapsing the entrance inward in a burst of white-hot sparks and warped steel. The boarding party surged forward, weapons humming with barely restrained energy, boots thudding against scorched plating as smoke bled from the ruined frame. On the bridge, alien officers scrambled at their stations, their voices vibrating in low, guttural harmonies that seemed to resonate through the floor. One officer, his face partially obscured by a rebreather mask that pulsed with every breath, turned sharply, his pale, elongated features contorting as he raised a sleek, needle-like firearm. Idris fired before the alien could react. The officer's body jerked violently, but instead of falling, it sagged backward with an unsettling slowness, as if resisting the pull of gravity. Smoke rose from the wound, curling along the ridges of his armor as he crumpled to the floor. "Secure the bridge!" Vance barked, striding forward. He pressed his hand against the alien control console, his eyes narrowing at the unfamiliar script scrolling across the screens. "Idris, see if you can pull up their navigation logs. We need to know why they're here." The lieutenant moved swiftly, bypassing the alien systems with tools salvaged from the ironclad. After several tense moments, a distorted map flickered to life on the screen. Idris frowned. "There's encrypted data here," Idris said, frowning at the screen. "Looks like fleet movement logs, but I can't make sense of it yet." Vance's stomach sank, but he forced his focus back to the task at hand. "We'll figure it out later. For now, this ship is ours. Get this ship under control first. Then we'll worry about Theta 9. Idris gave a rare grin, patching into the comms. "Aye, sir. They won't know what hit them." The alien bridge lay silent, save for the distant crackle of smoldering conduits and the faint hum of the ship's backup systems. Idris wiped the back of his hand across his forehead, smearing soot over his skin, as his eyes swept across the control panels now flickering erratically under human command. The remnants of the alien crew lay restrained or motionless along the far bulkhead, their resistance ending with the sharp finality of desperation. Captain Vance moved between the command consoles, boots echoing against the metal deck. His gaze lingered on the alien symbols sprawling across the primary display. The language was still unfamiliar, but the urgency behind those flashing red indicators needed no translation. "Anything, Idris?" Vance asked, his tone calm but edged with impatience. Idris knelt beside an open terminal, tools scattered around him. I'm slicing through their secondary encryption now. The command codes aren't complex, just layered. He exhaled sharply as another partition gave way beneath his bypass program. We should have full access to their nav system soon. Sergeant Ocampo crouched near a dismantled power junction. Her sleeves rolled past her elbows, exposing grease-smeared arms. These conduits are barely holding together, she muttered, sparking wires pressed between her fingers. I can keep us afloat, but we'll be running on patchwork. Vance nodded, stepping back as the rest of the boarding team spread out, securing corridors leading to the bridge. The air felt heavier now, as if the ship itself resisted their presence. Then the transmission crackled to life. It wasn't coded. The alien speakers echoed through the bridge in a guttural language, but the cadence and urgency were unmistakable. Idris glanced up sharply from his station, adjusting the audio filter. The translator worked sluggishly, words bleeding into recognizable phrases. The fleet is fully engaged in Kalos 7. The diversion has held. Continue disrupting secondary stations until Phase 2 can begin. Vance straightened. His eyes narrowed at the vague phrasing. He exchanged glances with Idris, whose brow furrowed as the alien officer continued speaking without realizing they were overheard. The humans remain unaware. As long as their primary fleet is distracted, the main objective will proceed without interference. The transmission cut, replaced by a low hum of static. Silence hung between them. Phase 2, Vance muttered. They're not talking about Theta 9. Idris tapped rapidly at the console, bypassing deeper into the alien databanks. Give me a second. I'm very close to accessing their tactical logs. His fingers dug into the interface, bypassing locks faster than before. Moments later, a tactical overlay flickered to life across the main view screen. A map expanded outward, and Idris's breath caught in his throat. Marked in glowing red sigils, multiple enemy fleets converged toward one system. The Sol system. Earth. Idris's breath hitched, and even Vance felt the cold prickle of dread claw up his spine. Vance felt the weight of the realization settle cold and heavy in his chest. The grand battle consuming the bulk of humanity's forces was nothing more than a distraction, a calculated move to draw attention away while the heart of humanity lay exposed. They're bypassing everything, Idris said, disbelief bleeding into his voice. Earth's their target. Vance didn't speak for several moments, his gaze fixed on the map. The alien ships were already in position, threading their way around established patrol routes and defense lines. Captain, Idris pressed, urgency rising. We need to send this to Theta 9. Vance nodded once, but his lips pressed into a thin line. We can't. Our comms are still offline. The ironclad systems were slagged before we boarded this ship. Idris cursed under his breath, shifting back to the alien terminal. What about their systems? Can we send something through their network? Unlikely, Vance replied. Their frequencies are isolated from human channels. Even if we broadcast, there's no guarantee anyone on our side would pick it up. The tension thickened as the seconds slipped by. So what do we do, sir? Idris asked, his voice low. Vance stared at the projection of the Sol system on the screen. The enemy fleets moved like shadows, unnoticed yet closing the distance with each passing hour. Vance gave a grim smile. Then we don't give them the chance. He stepped forward, brushing past Idris. Secure all systems. We're taking their ship home. The hum of alien engines stirred beneath their feet, a low, uneven vibration that felt more like the ship was resisting than responding. Idris's hands hovered over the alien console, the weight of the task sinking in. Rourke gave a dry laugh, shaking his head. Hell of a plan, Captain. As the crew scattered to carry out orders, Idris remained at the console, watching the map of Earth flicker faintly against the gloom. The warning was clear, but time was already slipping through their fingers. If they failed, there'd be no one left to send another signal. Idris was elbow-deep in alien circuitry by the time the bridge settled into tense silence, his shoulders hunched as he twisted scorched wiring into makeshift repairs. Sparks scattered like fireflies in the dim light. The hum of unstable power filled the space, vibrating beneath his palms. Across the room, Sergeant Ocampo crouched beneath an open panel, sleeves rolled past her elbows, her hands buried in the guts of the alien power grid. "This thing's held together by spite and bad welding," she muttered, teeth gritted as another surge rippled through the cables. "I've rerouted what I can, but if she wants to die, there's not much holding her back." The bridge flickered in protest, shadows rippling unnaturally along the curved walls. Rourke stepped forward, fastening the last of his pressure bandages with his teeth. "I feel like this ship's fighting us every step of the way," he muttered. Ocampo snorted without looking up. "That's because it is." Vance smirked faintly, but didn't turn. "I've flown worse." Idris pushed aside a loose panel and climbed to his feet. "I can rig the nav, but it's going to feel like dragging dead weight across every sector." His fingers hovered over the alien symbols glowing faintly on the main console, half deciphered but still unfamiliar. Vance stepped closer, watching the unreadable scrawl flicker. "Theta 9, he said simply. Idris keyed in coordinates as best he could, and after a few moments, a rough projection sputtered to life across the screen. "It's not pretty," Idris muttered, scanning the jagged path, "but it'll get us there." Ocampo shoved the panel closed with her boot. "I'll keep this thing from falling apart. Just don't hit anything." Vance's eyes narrowed at the display. "Good enough. Rourke, take the weapons station. I want whatever's left online in case we need to clear a path." The process of stabilizing the ship began with rough improvisation. Idris stripped down the power distribution panels, bypassing scorched conduits and rerouting energy from secondary systems. Each adjustment was met with the groaning protest of alien machinery barely responding to their crude efforts. The bridge felt too open, the angles of the consoles and corridors alien in design, almost as if the ship itself rejected their presence. The walls curved in unnatural arcs, and faint luminescent patterns rippled beneath the surface of the controls, responding to Idris's touch with a hesitation that felt almost sentient. Sweat clung to Idris's brow, not from heat, but the sheer exhaustion of keeping the alien system stable. His hands trembled slightly as he rerouted more power, the strain of unfamiliar technology weighing heavier with each passing second. "I'm getting partial thruster control," Idris called out. "It's sluggish, but we can move." The ship groaned at every adjustment, lights flickering dangerously as the last reserves of power funneled into the engines. The bridge felt fragile, one miscalculation away from unraveling. Rourke stepped in beside Vance. "This thing isn't made for human hands, Captain. We can fly it, sure, but it's going to feel like dragging a corpse through mud." As the systems gradually flickered to life, the alien displays adjusted under Idris's manipulation. He watched as lines of unreadable text scrolled across the view screen, slowly shifting into more familiar navigational charts. "There," Idris breathed, half in disbelief. "I think I've got the nav locked. We can plot a course." As Rourke moved to comply, Idris hesitated. "Captain, this will only work if we aren't detected first. We have zero stealth capability." Vance met his gaze. "Then we stay fast and unpredictable. Let's move." With the engines rumbling beneath their feet, the alien vessel lurched forward, sluggish but obedient. Through the viewport, the distant gleam of stars stretched along the horizon. The trip ahead was long, and hostile space lay between them and survival. But they had come too far to stop now. The alien vessel groaned as its engines flared unevenly, rattling loose panels and shuddering beneath their boots. Idris grimaced at the sound, fingers tightening around the edges of the console as he adjusted their course by mere degrees. The unfamiliar controls felt more like wrestling an animal than piloting a starship. "They know we're running," Rourke muttered from the weapons station, his eyes scanning the flickering alien displays. His posture was rigid, tense. "Sensors just lit up. Something's moving in formation behind us." Vance barely acknowledged the update, his focus pinned to the viewport. Out there, beyond the dark, were the hunters. He could feel them closing the gap. "Distance?" Vance asked. "Roughly 20,000 clicks and closing. They're burning hard," Rourke replied, tone clipped. "Looks like a wing of corvettes and something bigger, maybe a battle cruiser." Idris swore under his breath. "We're not outrunning corvettes in this thing. It flies like a brick with a grudge." "Then we don't outrun them," Vance said, eyes narrowing. "We outsmart them." Rourke glanced over his shoulder. "Care to share how we're supposed to pull that off?" "We use what we have," Vance answered, stepping closer to the center console. "This ship isn't fast, but it's still one of theirs. If we can mask our energy signature, we might blend in just long enough to slip past their net." Idris exhaled slowly. "I can bleed power from non-essentials, dampen emissions, but it won't hold up to close-range scans." "It doesn't have to," Vance replied. "We just need enough time to reach Theta 9. Every second buys us space." "Risky move," Rourke muttered, but he didn't argue further. Idris knelt beside the exposed wiring panel, hands moving quickly to reroute systems. The lights dimmed fractionally, and the low hum of secondary subsystems sputtered as power drained elsewhere. The alien ship protested with groans through its hull, but the energy signature began to dip. "Power dampening engaged," Idris called out. "If they weren't paying attention, they might think we're just drifting debris." "If they weren't paying attention, we wouldn't be running," Rourke replied dryly. Vance let out a breath, settling into the command chair with a grim look. The displays flickered, showing the tightening formation of alien ships on their tail. The lead vessel shifted, fanning out in a slow, deliberate spread. They were hunting by pattern, sweeping for irregularities. "They're smarter than we want them to be," Vance muttered. "Keep the course. Let's see if we can break their line." Minutes stretched into an eternity. The bridge was suffocated by silence, save for the occasional crackle of energy systems being manually rerouted by Idris. Rourke sat perched at weapons, one hand hovering over the controls. "Captain," Idris said suddenly, his voice tense. "We've got a problem. There's an energy spike coming from the aft quarter. Something in the engine core isn't stabilizing." "Can you fix it?" Vance asked, his eyes narrowing. Idris hesitated. "I can try, but it's going to light us up like a flare if I fail." "We don't have the luxury of choice. Do it." Idris swallowed hard and dove back into the tangle of alien circuitry, muttering curses in 3 different languages as sparks jumped from overloaded conduits. Rourke watched him for a moment before turning back to the viewport. "They're adjusting course," Rourke said grimly. "They know something's off." "Hold steady," Vance ordered. "We make our move only if they get within weapons range." Sweat dripped from Idris's temple as he worked, every twist of his wrist feeling heavier under the weight of the moment. The alien technology resisted his efforts, pushing back with stubborn defiance. "I think I've got it," Idris called, panting slightly. The energy reading stabilized, the flare dropping off the charts just as one of the corvettes veered dangerously close. "They're within scanning distance," Rourke warned. Vance gripped the armrest. "Let them pass." The corvette drifted alongside them for a moment that felt stretched thin by the weight of fate. Then, without altering course, it pulled ahead, continuing its sweep toward empty space. A collective exhale filled the bridge. "They bought it," Idris whispered, slumping against the console. "Not for long," Vance said, eyes fixed on the corvettes as they began their next pass. "Bring the engines online, minimum thrust. We slip away slow." The ship moved, crawling forward at a glacial pace, but moving nonetheless. "Theta 9 won't wait forever," Vance murmured. "And if they catch us before we get there, it won't be much of a chase. It'll be an execution." The distant glow of Theta 9 was just beginning to crest over the horizon when the alien vessel's comm array flickered to life. It was weak, sputtering with interference, but Ocampo's persistence had finally forced something through. She sat hunched over the console, eyes narrowed, fingers gliding across the alien interface with the confidence of someone who'd spent hours decoding foreign technology. "I've got something," she said, voice tight with concentration. "It's patchy, but I think I can boost it long enough to get a message through." Idris, strapped into the pilot's seat, glanced briefly over his shoulder. "Good. Make it count." Vance stood behind Ocampo, watching the scrambled signals scrolling across the display. He didn't understand half of it, but the urgency in Ocampo's posture told him enough. "Start transmitting," Vance ordered. "Theta 9's going to need every second to scramble fighters if those bastards catch up." Ocampo nodded and leaned closer to the console. "This is Captain Vance of the Ironclad." A violent tremor cut her off as plasma fire glanced off their port side. Grady's voice shot through the comms. "They're back on us, Captain. 3 frigates. One's already locking weapons. I'm keeping them busy, but we won't last long if they pin us down." Vance's jaw tightened. "Idris, evasive maneuvers." Idris didn't respond. He didn't need to. The alien vessel twisted sharply, its thrusters groaning under the strain. Grady returned fire, the pulse cannons barely stabilizing between volleys. Ocampo cursed under her breath but kept working. The comm flickered dangerously. "I'm losing the signal. Hold it together," Vance snapped, gripping the edge of her station for balance. "Theta 9 needs to know what's coming." Ocampo exhaled sharply, steadying herself. Her hands moved faster. Static swelled over the comm, and for a moment it seemed like the array would cut out entirely. Then, a faint voice crackled through. "Unidentified vessel. You are entering. Restricted." Ocampo interrupted. "This is the Ironclad crew, aboard an enemy vessel. We're being pursued. Enemy fleet en route to Theta 9. This is not a drill." Silence. Then the static cleared enough to reveal a new voice, Theta 9's operations chief. "Ironclad crew, we read you. Confirm your identification." Ocampo locked eyes with Vance. He nodded. "Send our command codes." The tension on the bridge was suffocating as Ocampo keyed in the codes manually. Seconds dragged on, punctuated by the distant thrum of Grady's cannons returning fire. Finally, the voice returned. "Identification confirmed. Stand by. Theta 9 defense grid activating." Ocampo exhaled in relief. "They've got us." Vance's grip tightened on the railing as if grounding himself in the only thing left holding them together, their sheer refusal to die quietly. Vance straightened. "Good. Now let's make sure they still have a station left to defend. Idris, get us there in one piece." Idris grunted as he adjusted their trajectory, thrusters flaring against the void. The chase wasn't over, but at least now they weren't running blind. As the alien vessel accelerated toward Theta 9, Ocampo remained at her station, fine-tuning the comms. Vance didn't miss the slight tremble in her hands, but he didn't comment. They all felt it, the weight of survival balanced on the edge of a fragile alien ship. And behind them, the enemy wasn't slowing down. The alien vessel lurched violently as another plasma round detonated along the port side. Sparks erupted from the console where Idris gripped the controls, his knuckles white under the strain. The ship was barely holding together, its structure groaning with each evasive maneuver. Ocampo's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and focused. "We're losing thruster power on the lower deck. I'm rerouting, but we won't outrun them like this." Vance didn't hesitate. "We don't need to outrun them. We just need to get within the station's defense perimeter. Keep us moving, Idris. Grady, cover our rear." "On it, Captain." Grady's voice echoed through the comms, followed immediately by the deep thrum of pulse cannons firing from the ship's aft batteries. The pursuing alien fighters scattered briefly, but the frigates pressed on relentlessly, continuing to chip away at the battered hull. Through the viewport, Theta 9 station loomed closer, its ring of orbital defenses glowing faintly against the star-speckled void. But the gap between the station and their pursuers was closing far too slowly. Vance could see the distant flashes of incoming fire from the station's defense turrets, but they were still out of range. "Theta 9, this is Vance aboard the alien vessel. We're approaching at top speed, under heavy fire. Request immediate defensive support." A burst of static crackled over the comm, followed by the calm but urgent voice of Theta 9's commander. "Captain Vance, We have visual. Hold course. Defense grid locking onto targets now. You're almost home. A sudden impact rocked the ship harder than before, sending Vance sprawling against the rail. Ocampo braced herself, gritting her teeth as her station flickered. Direct hit to the starboard engine. We're venting drive plasma. Idris, cut power to that section before it overloads. A tremor rippled through the deck, loose wiring snapping free and coiling around Idris's ankles as the ship groaned under the strain. Idris swore under his breath but obeyed, the ship immediately listing as the engine shut down. The vessel drifted into an awkward half-spin, making it an even easier target for the incoming frigates. "Theta 9, we're not going to make it at this rate," Ocampo warned, her voice strained. Before Theta 9 could respond, Grady's voice interrupted. "2 more enemy cruisers just dropped in behind the frigates. They're committing everything to this." Vance's mind raced. They couldn't engage directly. The alien ship wasn't built for the kind of sustained firefight the enemy was forcing. But they didn't have to win. They just had to survive. "Grady, redirect all fire to the lead cruiser. Focus everything we have. We're not here to kill them, just to make them hesitate." Grady acknowledged the order, and the ship's aft cannons unleashed a barrage of plasma rounds, briefly illuminating the darkness. One of the alien cruisers veered slightly, its shields flickering under the assault. It wasn't much, but it slowed their advance. Vance shifted his attention to Ocampo. "Patch me through directly to Theta 9's defense commander." Ocampo worked quickly, and within seconds, a secure channel opened. The station commander's face flickered onto a side monitor, his expression tense but composed. "Captain Vance, what's your status?" "We need those defenses now. We can't hold them off much longer." The commander's eyes narrowed. "Understood. Redirecting all outer perimeter turrets to intercept. You're within range in 2 minutes." "We don't have 2 minutes." Vance's gaze locked onto the advancing cruisers. "Tell your gunners to start firing past us. If they don't hit something, it'll keep them off balance." The station commander hesitated briefly, but Vance's tone left little room for debate. "Acknowledged. Adjusting fire pattern. Hold steady." As if on cue, Theta 9's defenses roared to life. Brilliant streams of laser fire arced across the void, stitching a deadly net between the human vessel and the alien pursuers. The incoming cruisers hesitated, momentarily thrown off by the sudden barrage. One frigate veered too wide, catching a turret burst along its midsection. The ship erupted in a ball of flame, debris scattering in all directions. Idris let out a breath. "That bought us time, but they're still coming." Vance nodded grimly. "We just need to make it to the outer perimeter." "Ocampo, how close are we to Theta 9's defensive shield?" "Less than a kilometer," she replied. "But our lateral thrusters are offline. We're drifting." Grady's voice crackled in again. "One of the cruisers just broke formation. It's circling around us. They're trying to cut us off from the station." Vance's jaw tightened. "Ocampo, divert whatever's left from auxiliary power to the forward thrusters. We need one last push." Ocampo's hands flew across the console. "It'll burn out the remaining circuits." "Do it!" With a mechanical groan, the ship surged forward, closing the final gap between them and the station's outer defenses. Plasma fire trailed behind them, skimming their hull but not enough to stop their momentum. As they crossed the threshold, the alien cruisers pulled back, unwilling to follow them into the heart of Theta 9's firing solution. The ship coasted into the protective range of the station, its hull scorched and trailing smoke. Vance finally allowed himself a breath, as Theta 9's fighters swarmed past them, engaging the remaining alien forces. Ocampo slumped back in her chair, sweat trickling down her temple. "We made it." The bridge was a mess, sparking consoles, smoke coiling from overloaded panels, and the faint flicker of emergency lights struggling to hold steady. Idris wiped sweat from his brow, eyes lingering on the cracks splintering across his display. The ship groaned as if protesting every breath of air they pulled from its failing systems. Grady leaned heavily against the weapons console, his breathing shallow, while Ocampo's knuckles remained white on the edge of her station, as if the ship might crumble at any second. Vance stepped toward the viewport, watching as the alien cruisers began their retreat. The station's defenses had held, but barely. "We're not done yet," Vance said, his voice low. "Get ready to dock. We need to make sure they know exactly what's coming for them." The docking clamps latched onto the alien hull with a grinding hiss, the tremor reverberating through what remained of the bridge. Vance exhaled slowly, his eyes fixed on the view beyond the fractured canopy. The station loomed ahead, its defense turrets still tracking the debris field, where the last alien ships had retreated. He could feel the ship's systems failing beneath his feet, the faint flickers of emergency lights the only illumination left. "Docking complete," Idris muttered, his voice hoarse. "We're not moving this thing again." The docking clamps snapped into place with a final jolt, locking the battered hull in place. The ship's outer plating creaked one last time, as if threatening to shear away, before the lights in the bay steadied. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then slowly, the crew exhaled in unison. "Good," Vance replied, rising from his seat. "We're done flying alien scrap for now." The crew moved in silence, peeling themselves away from consoles and repair stations. Every movement betrayed exhaustion, but no one hesitated as they descended the ramp into the docking bay. Ocampo was the first to step onto solid ground, her shoulders sagging with relief as station medics rushed toward them. Vance followed close behind, pausing for a brief moment at the base of the ramp. His eyes traced the scorched hull of the ship, memorizing every scar. Even docked, he refused to let himself relax. Not while the echoes of the chase still pounded in his mind. "Get the injured to medical," Vance ordered. "Everyone else, debrief in 10. A figure emerged from the corridor ahead, flanked by 2 officers. The man's uniform was pristine, but the dark circles beneath his eyes told Vance everything he needed to know. "Captain Vance," the commander greeted, offering a curt nod. "I need you in the command center." Ocampo stayed by his side as they made their way through the bay, trailing the station's commander. "Lead the way," Vance said, already moving. The corridor leading to the command deck hummed with quiet urgency. Screens flickered with incoming reports, and personnel moved with sharp efficiency. They stepped into the command room, where a large holomap displayed the sector and the remnants of the alien fleet's trajectory. Vance placed the small drive from the alien ship on the console. "This has everything we pulled from their systems. It's incomplete, but there's enough to show what they were planning." His fingers lingered on the drive for half a second longer than necessary before releasing it. That small weight felt heavier than anything he had carried in months. A technician retrieved the drive, plugging it into the central array. Lines of alien script scrolled rapidly before converting into human-readable data. A map of the sector highlighted several points, each marking vital transport relays along the Sol corridor. "They were cutting us off," Ocampo said, reading over the technician's shoulder. "Everything was leading to a blockade around Earth." The station commander stiffened. "How long do we have?" "Not long," Vance answered. They were waiting for the right moment. The main fleet's engagement was a distraction. The commander turned to his comms officer. "Open a secure channel to the UED High Command. Priority 1. As the officer complied, the crest of the United Earth Defense filled the holoscreen. Admiral Tariq's face appeared, his eyes narrowed with expectation. "Captain Vance," Tariq began. "I understand you have vital intelligence." Vance inclined his head. "Sir, we intercepted an alien vessel and secured classified data. The Coalition wasn't just attacking outposts. They planned to isolate Earth by dismantling our relay networks. If we hadn't intercepted this, they would have succeeded." Tariq's gaze shifted to the data streaming behind Vance. The Admiral's jaw tightened. "I see it," he said, his tone dropping to a cold edge. "That blockade could have strangled Earth's entire defense grid. You've done more than just save your crew. I'm dispatching reinforcement fleets immediately." "I only did what was necessary," Vance replied. The channel cut, and the command room settled into tense preparation. Orders were relayed, and ships began to reposition. Vance exhaled, allowing himself a brief moment to reflect as the station commander clapped a hand on his shoulder. "You may have just changed the outcome of this war." Vance's expression hardened. "Let's hope it was enough." The observation deck overlooked the docking bay, where the alien vessel lay in silence, its hull scorched and bent from the relentless pursuit. Vance stood at the edge of the viewport, arms crossed, as the faint tremble of distant thrusters signaled the mobilization of the UED reinforcement fleets. From this vantage point, he could see the sleek silhouettes of human cruisers departing in formation, their engines flaring against the backdrop of Theta 9's defense grid. Ocampo joined him quietly, her gaze following the ships as they ascended into the void. "They're moving fast," she noted, her voice low. "Admiral Tariq isn't wasting any time." Vance nodded, his eyes never leaving the departing fleet. "He knows what's at stake. We all do." Below the deck, Idris and Grady oversaw the final offloading of supplies salvaged from the alien ship. Crates of munitions and medical gear were being catalogued, while engineering teams swarmed the hull, scavenging anything that might prove useful. Every part, no matter how insignificant, was repurposed. Survival left no room for sentimentality. The distant glow of the departing fleet faded into pinpricks of light until they merged with the stars. Vance exhaled through his nose, letting the weight of the moment settle. "You think it'll be enough?" Ocampo asked, breaking the silence. Vance finally turned to face her. "I don't know. But if they hadn't left now, Earth wouldn't have had a chance." Her eyes lingered on him, searching for something beneath the stoic exterior he wore like armor. "And us?" she pressed. "What happens next for the Ironclad's crew?" He let the question hang in the air. "We wait." As if summoned by his words, the station's comms crackled to life. "Theta 9, operations reporting. UED reinforcements have engaged their intercept positions. Admiral Tariq has confirmed fleet deployment along the Sol corridor." Ocampo arched a brow. "Efficient." Vance allowed himself the briefest flicker of a smile. "He doesn't waste time." He started toward the lift, but paused long enough to glance back at the docking bay. The alien ship remained still, a ghost of the battle they'd barely survived. He watched as Idris gestured toward one of the engineers, clearly arguing over the state of the ventral thrusters. "They've earned their scars," he said quietly, watching Idris and Grady move with the stubbornness that had kept them alive. Ocampo's lips tugged into a faint smirk. "Idris or the ship?" He didn't answer. The lift doors hissed open, and they stepped inside, ascending toward the command deck. The station's command center was a hive of controlled urgency. Tactical displays hovered over consoles, projecting fleet movements in real time. Officers relayed orders, coordinating the dispersal of the UED fleets to intercept points along the Sol corridor. Vance lingered by the viewport as the last of the cruisers vanished into the abyss. Ocampo leaned against the console beside him. "Think we'll see them again?" "Maybe," Vance replied, "but if they need us, we'll be ready." Behind them, Theta 9's lights cut through the darkness, standing alone but unbroken against the stars. "Hey there again. I'm glad you've come so far. Hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to hit the like button and the subscribe button. This is really important to the channel. Really important.